Hello and welcome to Forward to the Past. In this episode I'm going to be talking about a very old bicycle that's somewhat forgotten in history, possibly because it has a far more famous older brother. I'm going to be talking about the kangaroo. Now, at first glances, this may look like a penny farthing that is designed for children because it's a lot smaller. But there's a lot more going on with this bike than just its size. But to get a true appreciation for the technical advances that this bicycle has, we must look at what came before. So we're going to have a little look first at the infamous penny farthing. The penny farthing is a typical design of engineering at this point in history. It was all about the giant drive wheel. It was not only bicycles that used this technology. Trains and huge stationary steam engines powering industrial-sized factories use this design as well. But the most common complaint about the penny farthing was it was too high off the ground. Should you fall, it's a long way down. The trouble was the penny farthing relied on the principle that the larger the wheel, the more ground covered in less time. If you reduce the circumference of the drive wheel, you would consequently make the top speed lower. Somehow they needed to find a way of making the drive wheel smaller without losing its top speed. The kangaroo has a technical advantage over the penny farthing, and this is what it is. It is a gear reduction. So the drive pedals are no longer connected directly to the drive wheel, but instead are connected to this gear cog. This gear cog drives this industrial-sized chain up to this smaller gear cog, which is directly attached to the spindle of the drive wheel. So it still cannot change gear. It's always going to be stuck in top gear essentially, but the big difference is it can obtain the same top speed as a penny farthing without the need to have such a giant drive wheel. We're going to look at some of the components that this bicycle has. So if we start at the very front, we have this. Now this is a footrest. So the kangaroo, much like the penny farthing, doesn't have any ratchet system. It cannot freewheel without the pedals spinning round at the same time. So if you're going down a hill or you just want to rest your legs, you can put your feet up on these and the pedal can continue to spin whilst your legs are nice and protected there. The penny farthing doesn't have this feature. In fact, the penny farthing, it was expected that you'd put your legs over the top of the handlebars, which is a terrifying thought. So this is a nice little touch to the bike. So the pedal here is not dissimilar to what you'd find on even brand new bikes today. I guess it really comes down to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The gear cogs here we've already talked about, so we know all about that and we know about the significance of them. So if we go up the forks here, we come to the handlebars. Now the handlebars aren't dissimilar to what you'd find on the penny farthing, so it has this curvature here, so you can put your legs into this gap when the pedal is at its highest point. And the brake itself is just this old-time shoehorn brake, which was very typical of the time. So just by applying pressure on the handlebar here, it will push the brake down onto the tyre and cause friction. Now these brakes are all right, but they don't work as efficiently as modern ones, which is not unexpected. But what I have found with these, if you use them for a prolonged time, for example going downhill, it will get hot. And the hotter they get, the less friction they have, and consequently the worse the braking is. So using the fixed pedals alongside this can help. So moving back onto the top of the backbone here, we have this very strong mount which attaches onto the forks, and then moving back we've got these adjusters for the saddle. So the saddle can move backwards and forwards. Believe it or not, but this is actually the original saddle, which has done very well over the last 120 odd years. And then speaking of original parts, all of this bike is original, including its solid rubber tyre. Despite how perished it is, it has never received a puncture. Now this strange little device here is what I can only describe as a trouser guard, or to any Americans a pants guard. So the penny farthing has this feature as well, because when you turn the steering on this, the whole wheel has to turn as well, and you included because you're sitting above the wheel. And if you've got loose trousers, they may catch on the tyre and the tyre will attempt to pull them through this gap. So this is just a guard which helps prevent that from happening. And it's never happened to me personally, so it obviously works. Now coming down the backbone, we have this very nice emblem here, which sadly has been lost mostly to corrosion and rust and age. But you can still see what it would have looked like, but it's quite hard to make out any words on it. Now moving down the backbone, we have here the rear mounting step, just like a penny farthing. It's kind of interesting that a bike so low to the ground would even have this feature, but it was obviously common at the time for people to want to mount their bicycles from the rear like you would have done with a penny farthing, so it's a feature that remained on the Kangaroo, despite the fact it's not possibly that necessary. So moving on to the rear wheel, we have this oiler here. So this just pops off, this little cap. It's not splined, there's no thread, so it doesn't screw down, just sits there with friction. And you can just drop a few drops of oil into the hole so it's ready to go for a ride. And as the wheel spins, it will help circulate that oil on the shaft. So I can stick that back on. Now speaking of taking this for a ride, I think it's time I took the Kangaroo out on the road. So with a Kangaroo, there's two ways you can get on it. You've got the more traditional way, which is from the penny farthing era, so you've got a step at the back for mounting, so you hop along, get some speed, and then get on it. So the kind of more conventional way you can get on it, providing you're tall enough, is simply to step over the saddle and get your foot on the pedal. So you need to make sure the pedal is ready, so when you push down, the bike will move. Otherwise it might stumble and you'll fall over. So with my right foot, I'll just hop along a bit to get it moving. And then with my left foot, I'll push down on the pedal and off we go. And I'll also demonstrate the two ways you can get off. So if I was to get off in the traditional penny farthing way, it would be like this. Now if I was to dismount in a more conventional way, I'd simply come to a stop and put one of my feet down, which you can't do on a penny farthing, and gracefully dismount like this. It really comes down to how eccentric you want to be about these things. So this is Tam Large, who owns this Kangaroo, and he's owned it since 2000. Now Tam, can you tell me, why did you buy this bike?
Well, back in the 60s, Brighton Museum had a lovely collection of early bicycles, and even that young I began to love the idea of ancient bicycles, and I saw a Kangaroo. They had an original one like this, and I thought, that is the ultimate bicycle. Penny farthing, it's lower, it's rare, and you can ride it without being so high in the off the ground, and falling off is not such a problem. And I always thought, I'd love one of those, but they're very, very rare, and none came up, and when one did, I didn't have the money. Finally, the bicycle and the money just by a tiny fraction coincided. There was a wonderful sale in Essex, a sharp sale of the Ramsgate Museum collection. And I had seen this about 6 months before in Ramsgate Museum. I didn't know it was there. I went to see something else. And I rounded a corner and I saw this on display, and I looked around and I crept up and I touched it. And it was the first time I'd actually touched a Kangaroo bicycle. And I thought, well, the museum looks as if it's getting a bit shabby. I'll ask them if they'll sell it, and they said no. 6 months later, the whole collection was sold, and I bought my Kangaroo, and after I bought it, on the day of the sale, when I got it to the car park, I jumped on it and I rode it round the car park before putting it in the car.
Of course. So you nearly didn't get it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yes,
Wow.
I waited a very, very long time. I waited basically 40 years for a kangaroo. It's just a wonderful machine.
One question that I would like to ask, which I haven't found any information on, the name. Why is it called a kangaroo?
That is one of the great mysteries of veteran bicycles.
It doesn't exactly resemble a kangaroo.
It doesn't resemble a kangaroo.
And hopefully it doesn't jump.
It doesn't jump. It doesn't hop.
There's no pouch.
Nobody that I have ever seen knows why they called it a kangaroo, but it was very neat. None of the other makers who copied it, because it was the first time that this arrangement had been done, none of the other manufacturers gave theirs a special fancy name, just
so
known as a geared front driver. But in fact, kangaroo, like sellotape, became the name.
Yes, it marketed it.
It marketed it, absolutely, and that name has stuck.
There
And
you
it's
go.
in pretty well every history book on the bicycle.
Yes.
It's wonderful to ride, as you've discovered.
Well, saying about riding, shall we take the penny farthing and the kangaroo out together?
I think that's a good idea.
Let's hit the road. Riding the kangaroo is a wonderful insight into the early days of bicycle history. Despite the fact that the kangaroo was a very brief design, it is an important missing link between the early bizarre designs of bicycles and the more modern conventional bicycle designs that we know today that have remained mostly unchanged for over 100 years. This is a wonderful machine. Thank you for watching.